Hello, you're listening to Abstract AF. I'm Sneha Jaswal, and in this episode, I'm going to talk about and review Kafka on the Shore by Haruki Murakami, one of his later works that came out in 2002. All I knew about this book before reading it was the fact that, like some of his previous works, Kafka on the Shore too has magical realism. Now, I'm not a big fan of magical realism, especially when the magic bit is so minimal that it only serves to confuse or deceive the reader. Because that's how I felt when I read Sputnik Sweetheart by Murakami. I had rated it a 3 stars on 5 because that man really knows how to spin his words. So while his writing is beautiful and engrossing to read, I feel like his storytelling is not as powerful. Which is why I wasn't too sure about reading Kafka on the Shore, but decided to read and review it for Abstract AF because I had a copy. So let's do a quick spoiler free plot overview. The story starts with a 15-year-old boy who runs away from home and decides to go by the name Kafka Tamura. His father is a weird, bitter man who prophesies a bunch of disturbing things that includes a prediction that the boy will have sex with his mother, who had abandoned them when he was barely 5 years old. There's also a parallel storyline about an old man called Satoru Nakata who was in a bizarre accident as a school child that left him permanently disabled, but also gave him the strange powers to communicate with cats. How the fates of these two very different protagonists are connected makes for a partly interesting and, quite frankly, partly boring story. After a solid first half, the pace kind of slows down and begins to get on your nerves, or at least began to get on my nerves. The characterization of Kafka Tamura as a bibliophile who is wise beyond his years seems interesting at first, and then starts to get a little too pretentious. The boy spends a lot of time in a library and has conversations with people that feel too textbook like. I mean, these guys are constantly quoting philosophers and great writers in the conversations, and I don't know, at some points it just feels like Murakami is showing off how much he has read or researched for the novel. The conversations don't feel authentic, and the characters are only quoting others or giving us their thoughts on what others had to say in their books or memoirs or whatever it is. And okay, it probably sounds a little ironic right now because that's exactly what I'm doing too, although I have not quoted anything from the book yet. Well, so if you're not fond of philosophical ruminations, Kafka on the Shore is definitely not a book that you will enjoy a lot. For me, I really liked some of the bits with Satoru Nakata talking to cats because of my fondness of cats. And Murakami also spins more interesting conversations when it comes to Nakata's subplot than the ones with the 15-year-old Kafka. Although one of my favorite things about the book is the bit where Kafka spends a few days in a cabin that's completely cut off from the world, has no electricity, so all Kafka has for company are books and nature. To anybody who has lived in a pre internet era, those parts would seem highly relatable and lovely. As far as the strongest theme in the book is concerned, it's honestly quite hard to pin down one, especially because there's a lot of absurd stuff that unfolds. Let me just read out the blurb for you to understand that. Kafka Tamura runs away from home at 15, under the shadow of his father's dark prophecy. The aging Nakata, tracker of lost cats who never recovered from a bizarre childhood affliction, finds his pleasantly simplified life suddenly turned upside down. As their parallel odysseys unravel, cats converse with people, fish tumble from the sky, a ghost like pimp deploys a hegel spouting girl of the night, a forest harbors soldiers, apparently unaged since World War II. There is a savage killing, but the identity of both victim and killer is a riddle, one of many which combine to create an elegant and dreamlike masterpiece. Now, I don't know if I can agree with the dreamlike masterpiece bit because some bits are more nightmarish than dreamlike. And there's no doubt that Murakami's imagination seems to be at its best form in this book. At least it's the best of the four I have read so far. So for me, Kafka on the Shore is a solid 4 stars on 5. Why not a 5 on 5? Because it gets boring in bits. A lot of pages could have been skipped. And Kafka Tamura for me is just not a very likable protagonist. He's definitely an intriguing character. A boy who was abandoned by his own mother. He's then raised by a reclusive, neglectful father who's potentially a nutcase. which is why Kafka runs away from his home in the first place. Now, what Murakami does with this book is explore the idea of alternate universes coexisting in the world we live in. He suggests that there are these things called entrance stones scattered around us, and they can be in any form, and people could accidentally step through these entrance stones, and that could result in disturbances in their current lives that cannot be explained easily. The author himself in an interview said that he wanted to write something that wouldn't have a definitive meaning to it. He said that readers would have to read the novel at least twice or even thrice to start seeing new meanings to the story. But hey, it's fiction, and I'm not going to read a 500 plus pages book again just so that I can see it in a new light. In fact, I originally did think about doing an episode where I would explain Kafka on the Shore, but it's a story that just cannot be simplified and wrapped up in a neat little explanation, especially if you've read it only once. So it's okay if you're not too sure about what some of the scenes mean. Draw your own conclusions or just let it go when you read this book. For me, the hero of the book is the old man Nakata. He cannot read or write, he has difficulty understanding most of what is happening around him, and offers a great contrast to 15-year-old Kafka, who is constantly reading and has an explanation for everything around him. And even though Nakata is content with his life, he too longs to read books and lead a normal life. While Kafka, ironically, is running from the kind of life Nakata would have happily accepted. In the end, Kafka on the Shore might seem to be about a lot of things, but for me, it's really about finding a balance through all the absurdities of life, of finding peace in chaos, and of giving yourself a second chance. Might seem like an oversimplification of a great work, but that's just my take. That's all for this episode. Talk to you in the next one.